Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Young Teachers Consultation Conference 2022. It is a real privilege to be chairing today. My name is Rashida Din, and I'm Junior Vice President of the NASUWT, the Teachers Union. Originally, we were going to be in person in Birmingham, but as there were no trains due to the RMT strike action, we decided to take this online. Solidarity to the RMT. The NASUWT remains committed to ensuring that we have as many young members as possible to be able to participate in the event. Therefore, we are really pleased to make this conference virtual this year. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Please download and use the conference app to fully participate in completing the polling, which is on the homepage. Anyone experiencing any technical issues with Zoom or the app, please pop a note in the chat box and a colleague will be able to assist. We want to encourage you to use the chat box, so please do share your thoughts and insights as you go throughout the day. And as you can see, we've got the code of conduct, which we are going to adhere to. In the afternoon, we will have the opportunity to discuss the polling questions that all attendees have had the opportunity to answer. You do need to submit your responses by midday, so please make sure that is done. And please follow us on Twitter at NUSWT, like, share and comment on our tweets using the hashtag @YTC22. We're really pleased to have Patrick Roach, our General Secretary, here today, who is going to talk to you all of things union, and hopefully we'll end with a question and answer session. So please do use the chat box. So over to you, Patrick.
Well, thanks very much, Rashida, and good morning, everyone. I've been told to keep it relatively short, but I'm not sure that I can because there's so much to talk to you all about. But just to say that I am really pleased to be able to address colleagues today. If not in person, then the next best thing, we'll do it online. Members from right across the UK coming together at what is really a critically important time for our profession. And I'd like to start off by expressing my thanks to colleagues on our staff, but also our Equal Opportunities Committee for putting together today's programme, for the important work, frankly, that they're doing with our young members and other advisory committees to end sexism and misogyny, our work on anti-racism, disability equality, LGBTI rights, and for ensuring that we keep the issues facing young teachers at the very top of the NASUWT's campaign agenda. And I think it's fitting as well that we are meeting during TUC Young Workers Month, a time for us to consider the issues that you're facing at work and to step up our campaigning on behalf of all young workers. You know, trade unions were founded to give ordinary workers a voice and to stand up for your rights at work. And the NASUWT is no different, colleagues. We're proud to be a union that's led by teachers for teachers, with the aim of winning better treatment and decent pay for all of our members. And we know that there's no job that's more important than teaching, but for too long, too many young teachers have said that the job is no longer rewarding, that the pressures of the job, workload, a lack of spare cash at the end of the month means that you don't even have a life outside of work either. Many young teachers are telling us their concerns about opportunities to access pay progression, the impact of temporary contracts, the lack of support during your probation, overrepresentation of younger teachers in casual supply work, which makes your working lives extremely precarious. And all too often, younger teachers are having to work harder and harder just to get by and to get on. Now, the last few years have been challenging times for all of our members, no doubt about that, but especially so for younger teachers. And you've been telling us that many of you are struggling to make ends meet, worried about how you're going to pay your rent, your mortgage, how you're going to put food on the table or heat your homes. And we know that young workers generally, right across the economy, are disproportionately impacted by the cost of living crisis, not earning enough to afford the basic living costs, relying on credit cards, overdrafts, financial help from family and friends, skipping meals, unable to have a social life, putting off starting a family, leaving home or changing jobs because of money worries. And in the last week or so, the government's independent economic forecasters, the OBR, predicted that all households will see the biggest drop in living standards on record in the next few years. And with spiralling workload pressures, it's no wonder that teacher morale is at rock bottom. It gives me no pride to say that, colleagues. It's a disgrace. We're seeing an exodus of teachers and head teachers from the profession. 62% more teacher vacancies in schools this year. More than 40% of new teachers are leaving the profession within the first 5 years, and 75% of teachers tell us that they're seriously considering quitting the job, more than half of them saying that pay is the reason. In the last decade, teachers like you have seen your pay in free fall, colleagues. And this year, governments right across the UK are imposing the biggest real terms pay cuts in a generation. You know, when we launched our Better Deal for Teachers campaign, we highlighted 3 issues facing the profession: workload, well-being, and pay. Now, all of those issues remain high on our campaign agenda, but right now, the issue of pay has to be a priority for us because it's a priority for many of you. I know that there are going to be many of you here today who are worried about how and whether you're going to be able to make ends meet, worried that inflation has already hit a 40-year high, 11.1% CPI inflation, 14.2% when measured in terms of real-world living costs. We're seeing soaring food and energy prices. Food inflation alone has reached 16.2%, and it's still rising, colleagues. And whilst many households can't afford to pay their fuel bills, we're seeing big energy companies announcing record profits of billions. And I want to say to you that we're doing everything that we can to address those issues. And whilst we continue to press government and employers, and it's right that we do that, colleagues, we're also stepping up. Our benevolent scheme is providing more grants for members who are experiencing financial hardship. You know, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, anyone who earns over £9,000 a year will see their wage packet shrink this year and next. But it's worse than that, colleagues, because unless the chasm between pay and your household bills narrows soon, there's not going to be anyone left to look after our health, to run our schools, to provide vital community services, or to care for the vulnerable. And against that backdrop of rising financial insecurity, we're seeing rocketing rates of diagnosis for anxiety, affecting millions of working adults. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, they've seen a very clear link between financial insecurity and poor mental health. People who are renting their housing, often younger workers, are at least twice as likely as homeowners to report losing sleep, feeling under strain, or depressed. But you know, the government wants to allow further increases in social rents from next year. No wonder millions of young workers are saying that they're worried sick about how they're going to pay their rent and their bills. Households with less than £1,000 in the bank are twice as likely to exhibit some forms of poor mental health and anxiety. So we have a government that's crashed the economy and is now asking you to pay the price for their economic incompetence, blaming everybody except themselves for a crisis that was created in number 10 Downing Street. You know, Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, says that he's pro-education. The Westminster government has announced £2 billion extra for schools next year and for 2024. So things must be on the up, mustn't they? But colleagues, there's not a penny for more to be spent on your pay. And let's be clear, this isn't extra money. Even the government has had to admit that their announcement will only return spending on schools to the levels that we saw in 2010 when they came into office. And the same misery that we're seeing in England is being passed on to colleagues in Wales, in Scotland, and in Northern Ireland, with a real-term squeeze on the Westminster government's block grant continuing. And we've got ministers in the devolved nations adding to that misery by insisting on more real terms pay cuts for teachers and other workers. You know, that's not only 12 years of underinvestment in education, but it's a demonstration of 12 wasted years and governments that have let down our children and young people, given up on investing in the education recovery that was needed to get the system back on track after the pandemic, given up on teachers this year and next. And many of you will know that the government is planning to cap public sector pay, and that includes your pay, colleagues, to 2% next year. That means more teachers forced into debt, losing their homes, using food banks, or quitting the profession altogether. And that's not what we want. Teachers didn't create the cost of living crisis, and you shouldn't be made to pay the price for it. You know, already a typical classroom teacher is more than £50,000 worse off than they would have been had their pay kept pace with inflation over the last decade. And let me break that down further for you, colleagues. That means that the pay packet of a classroom teacher on the starting salary of M1 is around £4,000 short of what it should have been had your pay been uprated by inflation since 2010. For a teacher at the top of the main pay range, that's M6, that's an annual shortfall of £6,000. Now just think about what you could do with an extra £4,000 to £6,000 this year. You know, for years, the government has worked on the principle that they can get away with paying teachers as little as possible. That's why we're arguing for a restorative pay award for teachers. Colleagues, with teachers' pay at the bottom of the graduate pay league table, now is the time for us to stop the rot. You should be angry, colleagues. You've got every right to be angry. But I say this, being angry isn't enough. You know, for months, we've been telling ministers across all 4 UK nations about the anger of teachers. We've been pressing for ministers to recognise the seriousness of the situation. We've asked them to get around the table, to stop taking the teaching profession for granted. We've waited, colleagues. We've acted responsibly. But we have to be clear to the government and to employers that our members, that teachers deserve better. And that means standing together and, if necessary, taking action together. Now, I know that the government's going to say that industrial action won't change anything, that children have already suffered enough during the pandemic, that more disruption is only going to hurt children. But you know what? It's the actions of the government that are hurting children. If schools can't recruit enough teachers, if they can't keep their teachers and head teachers, or if teachers and head teachers are demoralised in the job and it's children who suffer. Government's going to say that real terms pay rises are simply going to fuel higher inflation. But the fact is, colleagues, that inflation is already soaring, whilst the pay of teachers and other public sector workers is falling. You know, they're going to say that the country can't afford to pay teachers more. But that's their choice, colleagues. It's a political choice. They're going to try to tell you that jobs will be lost if you take industrial action. But the fact is that the jobs of teachers and support staff are already being lost because the government's refusing to do what it takes to invest properly in education. And let's be clear, colleagues, the government has got it wrong. They're not only not on the side of teachers, they're not on the side of parents as well. Parents and the public agree that teachers deserve a better deal too. Earlier this year, independent research by ComRes found that parents of children under 18 are more likely to say that teachers would be justified, colleagues, in taking industrial action if teachers were given a pay rise below inflation. The highest support amongst parents and the public was amongst parents of children aged between 5 and 10 years old. On teacher pay, 2/3 of adults said that teachers should be paid better for the jobs that you do. And parents of children under 18 were more likely to say that teachers should be better paid. 72% of those parents said that, with support rising even higher amongst adults of children aged between 5 and 10, where 80% of those parents said that teachers should be paid more. You know, in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in the Isle of Man, our members have already said enough is enough, and they voted for a better deal for teachers, and they should be congratulated for the stand that they are taking. So now for members across England and Wales, it's your turn to do the same. We're asking you to vote for action short of strike action, as well as for strike action. We want government and employers to know that there's a price to be paid if they cut teachers' pay. So join us and join in. This is a fight, colleagues, that we can and we must win. So colleagues, let's stand together. Let's send a clear message to employers and to governments that young teachers demand better. Let's show our resolve to take action for the future of the profession that we love, and to take action if that is what it takes. That we say, respect our teachers, invest in the profession, and protect children's education. Colleagues, really proud to be with you today, really proud to have you as members of the NASUWT. I look forward to seeing you all very soon in person. In the meantime, thank you for all of your support. Thank you for your solidarity in campaigning for a better deal for teachers. Stay safe, stay active in the NASUWT, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Resounding. That'll really kind of get us all motivated for the action that's going to be going forward. And just as a reminder, we are balloting teachers, so make sure that you post your ballot papers in the post. And that's really important that you do that. If you've lost your ballot paper or mislaid it, etc., please go on to the website, and there's an email address there that you can actually request a new one. And what's really important is that you tell your colleagues, remind your colleagues to do the same thing. Okay, so that's something that's really important, and that message has got to carry. Right, so I think what was really resonated with me, Patrick, was the fact that 40% of new teachers are leaving in the first 5 years. We've got a brain drain, an experience drain coming in, okay, and that is not good enough in our profession. Young people, these young teachers, they're the lifeblood of our profession. We need those young teachers. So what do you think we need to do to make sure that we engage more with our young teachers, because their voice is really one of the most important voices in our movement?
Yeah, as you say, Rashida, one of the most important voices in our movement. They are the future. You, colleagues, are the future of our movement. And it's really important. That's why we're running events like today's event, our Young Teachers Consultation Conference. We have our Young Members Advisory Committee, and I know there are members across the country who might be interested in that and worried perhaps about whether they've got the time to commit to those kinds of activities. You know, we do conferences like this at weekends, recognizing the demands on your time during the working week, but we're also doing things which are online at times and at places that will work for you, colleagues. And we really do mean what we say. You know, you've joined us, you've made the most important decision of saying, I want to be part of the teachers union, the union that is led by and for teachers. But we don't just want you to join us, we also want you to join in with the NASUWT. That's why our young members are really a key priority for the NASUWT in terms of our campaign objectives, because we want you to have a career that you can invest in, that you can be committed to. We don't want to see young teachers who've gone through the, you know, the ordeals of graduating, of completing their initial teacher training, of passing their induction and probation, only to be lost to the system. That's not good for our profession. And frankly, it's not good for children and young people either. That's why we are pressing really hard to raise the standard, raise the status of the teaching profession. And that starts with paying teachers properly for the jobs that you do and giving you the time to be able to do the job that I know that you all love doing. You all love teaching children and young people. You need to be given the time to do that job properly. Now, the best way we can do that, colleagues, is by being part of the union. You know that. That's why you joined the NASUWT in the first place. We need to spread that word to other young teachers. I know that there are many young teachers out there that perhaps have said to themselves, is a union where I want to be? Do I want to be a member of a union? Will that count against me in terms of my career? Well, absolutely not. You know, we've had young teachers who've been part and active in our union who are successful not just in the union but successful in their job as well. I believe this, and I'm sure you do too, Rashida, that great teachers are union made. That's the truth of the matter. So yes, get more young teachers involved. Tell us what you want to see on our agenda. Tell us what you think we should be campaigning on, and we will make that happen, because we are a union that's led by teachers for teachers. So you tell us what our priorities should be, and we'll look to deliver on those priorities.
Absolutely. And that's how I became involved as a young teacher. I joined, became a rep initially. I joined my local association. I wrote motions. I became the equality officer, and that is the route up. I would advise, if you're not active in your local association, is to go and join and become more active in that. Ask for roles, ask for responsibility, because that's how your own leadership journey will grow as well. Fantastic. Now, Patrick, one of the things that I have asked you before is your work in the wider sort of, society, and I'm talking in particular about the anti-racism task force that you chair. Could you tell us a little bit about how you became involved, what successes have happened, and where to go next? Because we know that having equality in our and racial justice in our society, that fight isn't over yet.
No, you're absolutely right there, Rashida. That fight is definitely not over. And, you know, again, I want to pay tribute to our young members who've also told us the importance of trade unions, of course, looking after the interests of our members in the workplace. Of course, we've got to attend to what I often refer to as those bread and butter issues at work. You know, your pay, your workload, your working conditions. Those are really, really important, because we want you in the job and we want you to be enjoying the jobs that you're doing. But you know, you don't work in isolation from everything else that's happening in the world around you. You know, whether that's the issues around climate justice, or whether that's the issues around now you know, the issues around lesbian and gay rights in our society, whether that's issues around racial justice within our society. And when I saw, you know, students and young adults taking the lead in campaigning for racial justice in the wake of, you know, the killing of George Floyd in the United States, which sent that ripple right around the world to say that Black Lives Matter, you know, that gave me a real sense of pride that actually our young people, our young workers, our young members are very politically engaged. And so through the work that we've been doing as a union, because we as a union have got a responsibility here, but also my wider work on behalf of the NASUWT, but also on behalf of all trade unions, through the work of the TUC's Anti-Racism Task Force has been so incredibly important. Because you know what? If we've got a workplace, if we've got a labour market that addresses issues of racial injustice and racial discrimination, and that works better for Black workers, then we're going to have workplaces and a labour market that will work better for all working people. You know, some of the things that we've uncovered through our anti-racism task force, the scourge of outsourcing, you know, when public service jobs end up being handed over to private contractors so that they can deliver those services at maximum profit and minimum cost, and that means minimum pay for working people. We know that Black workers are overrepresented there, but actually, if that's allowed to happen, then all workers suffer. We know about agency work, and you know, for many young teachers, they are at the mercy of working for supply agencies. That's about maximizing profit and minimizing the cost of providing those services and therefore of paying teachers. Fire and rehire practices, where employers say, we want to just change your contracts of employment. You saw it, didn't you, last summer with regard to the scandal at P&O Ferries, you know, where, hundreds of workers were dismissed on a Zoom call so that employer could dismiss them and re-engage other workers on inferior terms and conditions. We know that Black workers are twice as likely to be suffering fire and rehire. But the fact is that if you can get away with it with regard to one section of the workforce, you can get away with it with regard to every part of the workforce. So a better deal for Black workers is a better deal for all workers, and that's what the Anti-Racism Task Force has been about. Now, within the NASUWT colleagues, we've also stepped up our work in respect of anti-racism as part and parcel of our big conversation on racial justice. And you know, colleagues, if you were involved last summer and earlier this year in that big conversation, don't worry, because that conversation hasn't stopped. We continue that conversation. Look out on our website, and I'm sure we can furnish colleagues with details about this. Look out on our website for what we've done in terms of our work on racial justice, how we are stepping up our campaigning on the issues of racial justice within our union, but also in the workplace and within the community as well. It's really important, colleagues, if we've got safe workplaces and we build safe workplaces for all, we'll probably have safer communities for all as well.
Thank you, Patrick. Right, I've got 3 questions for you. So I'm going to invite people to ask the questions live. And if that doesn't work, then I'll ask the questions. So here we go. And I'm afraid everyone's in as anonymous, so I can't sort of say names. Whilst we're waiting for that participant to join live, I've got another question for you. As a new teacher, I'm worried if I take strike action, will it impact on my relationship with my head teacher?
What I would say to that is it shouldn't. I mean, unless your head teacher has completely lost the plot, it should not do so. Strike action is a legitimate and lawful action. It's a collective action. You're not taking action against your head teacher. You're taking action because you want a better deal for teachers. But can I say this, colleagues? We're in unprecedented times here. Not only is the NASUWT balloting for and taking industrial action, but actually we're seeing head teachers doing exactly the same thing. Head teachers who are part of our union, of course, well, I would expect no less, but head teachers who are part of other trade unions, such as the National Association of Head Teachers or the Association of School and College Leaders, who are currently consulting their members on the question of whether or not to ballot. So the reality is that the whole profession, teachers and head teachers, are absolutely united. We are as one in saying that teachers, the profession, deserves better, that children and young people deserve better. We can't continue with a recruitment and retention crisis in our profession. That's no good for the teaching profession, and it's no good for children's education either. So I think, colleagues, that you can expect head teachers to be on your side if the time comes that we have to take industrial action.
Brilliant. Next question. I'm an early career teacher. I'm worried it will have an impact on my progression.
Absolutely not. And again, if members are concerned about that and that becomes an issue in your school as a result of taking industrial action, then you need to be letting us know, because the law protects you, colleagues. The law is quite clear. This is a fundamental employment right. It's a fundamental human right to be able to take industrial action. And that's a right that we'll continue to defend and argue for as we go forwards. And any employer, any head teacher that seeks to victimize an individual teacher for taking industrial action, whether you're an early careers teacher or you're a teacher of more years of experience in the profession, then those employers, those head teachers can be legally challenged and held to account. So there should be no fear about taking industrial action. In fact, taking industrial action is the best protection for you in your workplace, in standing up for and demanding better treatment at work, whether that's about better pay, whether that's about tackling your workload, whether that's about dealing with violence and disruption in your classrooms. Standing together with your colleagues with a lawful industrial action ballot is the best protection for you.
Brilliant. Another question, a question we hear quite often, actually. I have a colleague who is an NUU member and they're not doing action short of strike action. What does this mean for NASUWT members?
It's a really good question. I mean, we have a long tradition as a union in balloting our members using two questions. One question, which you would expect, is, are you prepared to take strike action? And the second question is, are you prepared to take action short of strike action? And we do that because we want to have, you know, all possible opportunities to seek to resolve our dispute, knowing that the last thing that teachers ever want to do is to take strike action. But if we have to take strike action, then we will do so. We will always coordinate and work with our sister trade unions, with that the NEU or anybody else for that matter, and we'll continue to do so. But you know what? We're in a cost of living crisis, colleagues. And, you know, you heard my remarks in my address a few moments ago about the impact of that cost of living crisis, an impact that you and everybody else in our membership is feeling. You know, in that cost of living crisis, we know that we're going to have to take a stand against a government that wants to continue depressing your pay. Now, that may mean strike action. And if that comes to it, that's what it will mean. And that's what we will ask you to do. But one day of strike action, colleagues, will that be enough to persuade the government to change its position? So how many days of strike action? How much protest will our members stomach in the context in which we want the government to move its position and deliver for teachers a real terms, fully funded pay rise for the profession? So we want to be able to make use of protest in all its forms, and that will include action short of strike action. And you know what? I often paraphrase it in these terms, colleagues. I say, you know, if government and employers are paying you less, then maybe teachers should start doing less. You know, you turn up, you teach, you go home, you plan your lessons, you mark the pupils' work, but basically you cut your cloth. And we ask you, these are the things that we're saying you should stop doing until such time as government comes to the table and government engages in meaningful talks and negotiations with us, and we deliver a better deal for our members. So action short of strike action is a way of you taking back some control over your working life, but also sending a very strong message to government that there's a price that government and employers will have to pay if they continue this unjustified assault on your pay. Now, we may be, you know, a union that's taking action short of strike action. Others might choose not to do so. But can I say this, colleagues? We will always work with our sister unions wherever it's possible for us to do so, to ensure we have maximum coordination, which delivers the maximum impact to change the minds of governments and employers so that they do invest in the teaching profession.
That's a great cornerstone of unions, isn't it? Working collectively, and we'll continue to do so. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. I think that's it for the questions. Oh, we've got one more question. Let's see what the late one is. Oh, right, here we go. Last question. I want to be more active in the union, but the people who run my local association don't seem to want to have young members involved. How can I resolve this?
Gosh, well, you need to let me know who these people are acting as gatekeepers in our local associations. Colleagues, our young members are the lifeblood of our union. And, you know, I go across the length and breadth of the country and I hear members and our activists saying, you know, we want more young members involved. We shouldn't be turning young members away. What we need is clearly, if there's a local association out there that is struggling to understand, well, how do I engage young members? What should I include on my agenda? You know, how do I speak about the issues relevant to our young members? Then, you know, they should talk to us. They should talk to Rashida and our national officers. They should speak to their national executive member, and they should speak to me as General Secretary, and we'll make it happen. You know, just like our big conversation on racial justice, we also need that big conversation on the issues facing our young members as well, the issues facing young teachers. And that means in every local association, the issues facing young teachers should be an item on the agenda. Colleagues, you can ask, you can say, you know, I'm coming to the next meeting of my local association and I'd like to see an item on the agenda, which is the issues facing young teachers. And you maybe suggest to your local association secretary, have you thought about inviting perhaps, you know, the junior vice president of the union or the general secretary of the union to come along and speak about the issues, or get somebody from, you know, our equalities committee to come and speak about the issues facing young teachers. That can be an icebreaker, colleagues, and that can help to open doors. But nowhere in our union, and I won't accept this, that anywhere in our union is a no-go area for our young members, that young members have got to wait their turn, that actually it's not a priority to be speaking about these issues. Without you, colleagues, our union ceases to be the effective voice for all teachers. We want young members front and centre of our campaigning, of our organisation, and of every meeting that takes place within our union, wherever you are in the country.
In fact, it is your union. We members, we are the union. It is a lay-led union. So really important question there. And finally, just one last one, Patrick. I was considering attending annual conference this year and looked at the motions from last year. A few of them address the issues I face as a young Black woman teacher. How can this be improved in the future?
Gosh, that's a really, really important one. Well, I'm now trying to remember off the top of my head. Was there nothing at all at last year's conference that was relevant? Maybe
there was some.
Maybe that was the view, and that you know, I respect the view that the colleague has raised there. But colleagues, conference is your conference. It's for members like you, through your local associations, to put forward ideas, topics that can be considered as part of the debate at annual conference. Those are conference motions. They come from your local associations, they get considered, and actually over the next couple or 3 weeks, we'll be playing back to the entire membership all those motions that have come in from local associations, and we'll be asking the membership as a whole to vote for the top 20 motions to get debated at annual conference next Easter. Now, it may be, colleagues, that a motion on young teachers doesn't make it into the top 20, but just because it doesn't make it into the top 20 doesn't stop Rashida and other national officers and the national executive from saying, you know what, we're going to put a priority motion to conference. We're going to call it whatever we're going to call it. I don't want to prejudge, but it could be a motion on young teachers and the issues affecting the future of our profession. That may happen. We also, though, have a conference fringe, and the conference fringe is about meetings like this meeting, where members come together to talk about other issues. They may not be on the conference agenda, they may not be in that top 20 motions, but we're going to talk about them anyway. That may be issues facing young teachers. It may be the issues facing young Black teachers. It might be, issues to do with climate justice. It could be anything. But we have that conference fringe. And if you've got ideas about what you think should be considered for our conference fringe, well, let us know about it. Speak to your local association, speak to your national executive member. Dare I whisper it, I do get correspondence from many of our members who say, I just want to share my bright idea with you, General Secretary. Just write in, let us know, because we're always looking for ideas that connect with what you want to see your union doing on your behalf. But conference, colleagues, is your conference. It's nobody else's. It's the members' conference. You set the priorities, you set the agenda, and you set the priorities that we will take forward once we conclude our deliberations next Easter.
Grassroots voices, that's what we're looking for. Thank you so much, Patrick, for that. And hopefully members will hear you again at all conferences, at regional conferences, etc. Can I just remind members to complete the conference polling questions, which can be found on the app, or you can find in the link in the chat box. Please take a few moments to make sure your voice is heard on a key range of issues. You must submit your responses before midday. We're going to come back at 11:30, so please use the Zoom links in the programme. And so have a great break and see you at 11:30. Thank you for those great questions, everyone. Thank you.